I grew up thinking that gratitude meant never asking for more than I was given. My parents repeated it like a family prayer. Be grateful. Don't compare. Life isn't fair. And I believed them. I believed them when my brother Adam got the newest shoes while I wore whatever was on sale. I believed them when he got private tutors and I learned things alone with YouTube videos. I believed them when birthdays meant big parties for him and a small cake at the kitchen table for me. The explanation was always the same. He's older. He needs more. You're easy. You understand. That was my role. The child who understood. The child who didn't complain. The child who made things easier. Became my entire personality. Smile. Shrink. Adapt. When Adam moved back home at 25 to get back on his feet, my parents acted like he was a wounded soldier returning from war. They cleaned the house, rearranged furniture, cooked his favorite meals. Meanwhile, I had already been working, paying rent, and doing my own laundry since 19. When my lease ended and my roommate moved states, I thought maybe I can stay with them for a few months. Save some money. Reset. Mom sounded thrilled on the phone. Of course, honey. Come home. We'll figure everything out. I actually cried from relief. I pictured my old room, my books, my things. I imagined sleeping somewhere familiar for once. But when I pulled into the driveway with my boxes, something inside me twisted. Adam's car was parked out front, and through the upstairs window I could see lights on in what used to be my bedroom. The one with the better sunlight. The one my grandma helped me paint. I carried the first box in, smiling like everything was fine. That was before I saw where I was supposed to sleep. That was before the couch became my space. And that was before I learned that, in this house, gratitude had a price I was no longer sure I wanted to pay. When I walked into the living room, the first thing I noticed was the blanket, folded neatly at the edge of the couch like a hint. Then the pillow. Then the little basket next to the coffee table with my name written on a sticky note. Your things, Mom said cheerfully. Like she was giving me a welcome gift at a hotel. I looked around slowly. No extra bed. No cot tucked away. No temporary plan waiting to be revealed. Just the couch. So, where should I put my boxes? I asked carefully. Mom didn't look up from arranging the basket. We don't have much space left, honey. Maybe the garage. Or under the stairs. Under the stairs. Like a storage container. Adam came down from the stairs right then, stretching like a king waking from a nap. Oh, hey, you made it, he said casually. He smelled like expensive cologne. His hair was still damp from a shower. My shower. How's the master bedroom? Mom asked warmly, eyes lighting up. He grinned. Huge. That walk-in closet? Amazing. I needed that. Needed. The word echoed. I swallowed. Wait. The master. Mom blinked at me like she didn't understand the question. Well, of course. He needs privacy. He's going through a lot. You'll be fine on the couch for a while. A while. No timeline. No end date. Just while. But what about my old room? I asked quietly. Dad appeared from the kitchen at exactly the wrong time. We turned it into storage. And your mom's craft space. And some office stuff. It's complicated. Don't make drama. Don't make drama. Classic. The go-to line anytime reality even slightly inconvenienced them. I nodded slowly because that's what I had always done. Adapt. Adjust. Make myself small enough to fit whatever space they offered. That first night on the couch, the living room felt like a waiting room I wasn't allowed to leave. I could hear Adam upstairs laughing on the phone. I could hear my parents whispering about bills and plans and what's fair. TV light flickered across the ceiling. I lay there with my blanket and my pillow and my basket and tried to convince myself it was temporary. Just a few weeks. Just until I save. Just until things get easier. Except the thing about temporary in my family was this. Temporary always became permanent the second I stopped asking questions. And nobody ever noticed what it cost me as long as I smiled and said thank you. By the end of the first week, the routine had already formed like a script everyone else knew except me. I woke up before everyone so I could fold the blanket neatly, fluff the pillow, and make the couch disappear like magic. Because if the couch looked like a bed, Dad would sigh and say the living room felt cluttered. Then I'd move my basket under the coffee table. Then I'd tiptoe around like a guest in a house I technically lived in. Meanwhile, Adam slept until noon. Doors closed. Music playing upstairs. Long showers that emptied the hot water tank. Plates left wherever he finished eating. Mom would sigh fondly. He's stressed. Let him rest. When I offered to cook, she said, "No, you're tired. You work. Just relax." But somehow, when dinner finished, I was the one washing dishes, wiping counters, picking up cups that weren't mine. Gratitude has chores. That's what I learned. One afternoon, I came home from work exhausted. My back hurt. My brain buzzed. I wanted nothing more than to lie down. But the couch was covered in laundry. Not mine. Folded piles. Towels. Shirts. Socks. Can I move these somewhere? I asked gently. Mom didn't even look at me. Just wait a bit. I'll get to it. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun set. Adam sprawled in the recliner scrolling on his phone. I sat on the floor because there was nowhere else to go. My legs went numb. My patience thinned. Mom, I really need to sleep. Can I just move them to the chair? She finally turned, eyes narrowing just slightly. You need to stop acting entitled. You have a roof, food, place to stay. Some people would be grateful. The word landed like a slap. Grateful. For the floor. For borrowed warmth. For silence instead of conversation. I swallowed hard. I am grateful, I said quietly. I'm just tired. Dad chimed in from the kitchen like a judge handing out verdicts. You young people think comfort is a right. When I was your age, I slept on worse. I nodded because arguing only ever bought me guilt and lectures. Eventually, Mom moved the piles. I lay down finally. The couch springs groaned. My pillow smelled faintly of detergent and dust. Upstairs, Adam laughed into his gaming headset with friends. He had privacy, space, quiet, a door he could close. I had the living room, the hallway lights seeping into my eyes. Constant awareness that at any moment someone could walk through and comment. And somewhere between that ache in my chest and the ache in my back, a new thought began forming. Maybe this wasn't generosity. Maybe this was convenience dressed up as kindness. And maybe, for the first time in my life, gratitude wasn't the lesson I needed to learn. Boundaries were. Things escalated slowly, the way water heats in a pot without you realizing it's about to boil. At first, it was little inconveniences dressed as family living. The TV stayed on late because Dad couldn't fall asleep without background noise. Kitchen light clicked on at 5 a.m. because Mom liked to start her day early. Adam wandered downstairs at random hours to raid the fridge, talking loudly on his phone like the living room wasn't also my bedroom. Every time I adjusted. I turned the volume on my life down one more notch. I wore headphones. I faced the couch toward the wall. I told myself, this is temporary. This is fine. One night, after a particularly long shift, I got home and noticed my basket was gone. My pillow, too. My heart dropped in that stupid, embarrassing way it does when you realize your small comforts are not actually yours. Mom, I asked, where's my stuff? She waved a hand. Oh, I put it in the closet. We had guests. I didn't want the living room looking like a dorm room. I opened the closet. Everything shoved on the top shelf, squished like a reminder. You do not belong here. You exist here. There's a difference. That same evening, Adam came downstairs holding a stack of towels. Hey, do we have more? I used most upstairs. Mom practically glowed. Of course. I'll wash them tonight. Just leave them. A pile appeared on the couch again. The same couch I was supposed to sleep on. I stood there for a second, fighting the urge to laugh because the absurdity almost felt funny. Can I move them? I asked. Mom sighed. You and your comfort obsession. It's one night. One night had become every night. My jaw tightened. My chest burned. And before I could swallow it, the words slipped out. If Adam needs the master bedroom and privacy, why can't I at least have a room? Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Dad looked over his glasses. Mom froze. Adam pretended to scroll. You're not here permanently, Dad said finally. We're not rearranging the entire house for your convenience. Convenience. The word sat there like a bad taste. I almost asked whose convenience, but I knew how that conversation ended. Accusations. Tears. Cold silence. So I bit my tongue. Later, when everyone went to bed and the house finally quieted, I lay staring at the ceiling and realized something unsettling. My family didn't see me as an adult returning home for stability. They saw me as adaptable furniture. Movable. Bendable. Placeable. Useful as long as I didn't take up too much space. And what hurt wasn't the couch itself. It was the lesson underneath it. Other people's comfort would always outrank my dignity here. Gratitude in their dictionary meant staying silent about that fact and thanking them anyway. I turned on my side, pulled the thin blanket to my chin, and whispered to myself like a promise. This won't be forever. Not because they'll change, but because I will. The breaking point didn't arrive as a dramatic explosion. It showed up disguised as an ordinary afternoon. I had just come home from work, feet aching, brain foggy, shoulders tense from pretending to smile at people all day. The house smelled like dinner. Laughter drifted from the dining room. Plates clinked. Chairs scraped. My family was already eating. No one had texted. No one had saved me a seat. I stood in the doorway for a moment, invisible in my own home, listening to them talk about Adam's stress, Adam's future, Adam's potential. He was explaining how hard it was to pick between two job opportunities he hadn't even applied for yet. My chair, the one usually shoved against the wall, had a bag sitting on it. Groceries. I swallowed and forced my voice out. Hey. They glanced up briefly, like a waiter had walked past. There's food on the stove, Mom said, already turning back to Adam. Not sit with us. Not join us. Food on the stove. Eat later. Eat alone. I went to the kitchen. Pan was almost empty. A little sauce. Some rice scraped thin. I ate standing up because the couch had laundry again and the table had them. In the living room, Dad launched into one of his speeches. Your sister should really learn from you, Adam. You go after big things. You don't settle. The fork paused halfway to my lips. I felt the words hit dull and heavy. Me? Settle? I had been working nonstop, cleaning their house, staying out of the way, sleeping without a door, folding up my life every morning like it was temporary decor. And somehow I was the one settling. Then it came. The sentence that snapped the last thread. Mom said with a dramatic sigh. At least she has a place to stay. Some kids don't appreciate what they're given. Dad nodded. Gratitude builds character. Couch is fine for now. Builds resilience. The couch. My room. My reality. My resilience training. Something inside me stopped being soft right then. Not angry. Not loud. Just clear. After dinner, they called me into the living room like I was being summoned to a meeting. I sat on the edge of the couch, my couch, while Adam sprawled in the recliner, the picture of comfort. Dad folded his hands. That was always a bad sign. "We need to talk about attitude," he began. "You've been sighing a lot. You seem touchy. We feel unappreciated." Unappreciated. The word tasted metallic. I blinked slowly. Unappreciated because? Mom jumped in. "Because we opened our home to you. We let you stay. We ask for so little in return, and still you act like this isn't enough." I looked around at the blanket folded like an apology, the basket shoved under the table, at the laundry occupying the only place I had to sleep. "What exactly is enough supposed to feel like?" I asked quietly. That irritated them more than shouting would have. Calm always did. Dad launched into a lecture I'd heard versions of my whole life. How kids owed their parents. How suffering built strength. How I should be grateful for the couch instead of demanding luxury. Luxury. A bed with a door apparently was luxury now. Mom nodded along. "Your brother needs peace. Privacy helps him think about his next steps. You're adaptable. You always have been. That's your strength." Adaptable is a beautiful word when you choose it. It's a cage when someone else uses it to justify giving you less. I felt something align inside me like puzzle pieces finally clicking. They weren't doing this accidentally. They had simply learned that I would accept less without complaint, that I would fold around their choices, that I would always make myself smaller to keep the peace. And for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of wanting more. I was ashamed that I had convinced myself I didn't. I took a breath and said the most dangerous sentence in this family. "I don't want the couch anymore." The room froze. Adam stopped scrolling. Mom's eyes widened. Dad's expression hardened into that familiar, disappointed mask. "Careful," he said slowly. "Gratitude or entitlement? You choose." I straightened my back, heart pounding but steady. Maybe I'm finally choosing me. The silence after I said those words stretched long and thin, like something fragile about to snap. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my ears, but I didn't take the words back. Not this time. Not again. Dad leaned back slowly, like a judge preparing a sentence. "You're overreacting," he said finally. "It's a couch. Temporary. You're not a child." That was the irony. I wasn't a child. And yet, the only space I was trusted with was the one piece of furniture that didn't even belong to me. "Temporary has been months," I said quietly. "Temporary has rules. Temporary has plans. This feels permanent. Just not spoken out loud." Mom crossed her arms. That meant we had officially entered the guilt portion of the discussion. "We have sacrificed a lot," she said. "We adjusted our lives for you. The least you can do is show some respect. Your brother needs the master bedroom because he's rebuilding. He has anxiety. He needs calm." I almost laughed. Calm. In the biggest room. With the walk-in closet. The king bed. The soft rugs. Meanwhile, my nerves buzzed every night while footsteps, conversations, and TV noise moved around me like weather I couldn't escape. "I also need calm," I said softly. "I work. I pay for my own things. I'm trying. But I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt." Adam finally spoke, not looking up from his phone. "You're being dramatic. It's not that deep. Be grateful. At least you're not paying rent." The sentence hit me in a place I didn't know still existed. Not paying rent. As if money was the only kind of cost that counted. As if dignity, rest, privacy, sleep, mental peace had zero value. I looked at him, comfortable, stretched out, fully relaxed, and something inside me went completely still. I wasn't angry at him. Not really. He had simply learned the lesson the house taught him. Your comfort matters. Mine didn't. Dad cleared his throat. Here's what we'll do, he said in that tone that always meant decisions were made without me. You'll stay on the couch. You'll stop complaining. You'll say thank you. And when you move out, you'll realize how generous we were. My chest tightened. There it was. Couch wasn't a kindness. It was a debt. A reminder. A way to say, remember, we could have given you nothing. I breathed in slowly. For once, instead of shrinking, I pictured what my life would look like if I didn't spend every night folding myself into silence. Pictured a small room. Maybe cheap. Maybe imperfect. But mine. A door that closed. A bed that nobody stacked laundry on. A space where gratitude didn't mean disappearing. I'm not staying on the couch anymore, I repeated, calmer this time. Then leave, Dad snapped, the mask finally slipping. The words didn't explode. They didn't crash. They just landed with the clean, cold clarity of truth. Leave. There it was. The threat woven through every speech about generosity. Not love. Not partnership. Control. Mom gasped like he'd gone too far, but she didn't correct him. Adam looked mildly uncomfortable, as if the conversation had finally become annoying. I nodded slowly. Not broken. Not defeated. Just finished. Okay, I said. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just decided. Their eyes widened because they thought I'd beg, cry, apologize. The old me would have. The version trained to accept leftovers and call them blessings would have. But this version simply stood up and walked to the garage. I opened boxes. I packed quietly. I didn't slam anything. I didn't shout. I just moved with the quiet certainty of someone who finally understood her own worth. I heard whispers behind me. She's being ridiculous. She'll be back. This is emotional. Maybe it was. But not in the way they meant. It wasn't an explosion. It was a boundary. It was the end of training myself to find comfort on the floor. And the beginning of something I had spent years believing I didn't deserve. A life that actually had space for me. By the time I finished packing the few things that actually belonged to me, the house felt different. Not quieter. Just exposed. Like the truth had finally been spoken out loud and there was no way to stuff it back into polite sentences. I folded my hoodie. My old notebooks. A couple of framed photos I kept more out of history than affection. Everything I owned fit into 3 small boxes and a worn-out duffel bag. That detail hurt in a slow, quiet way. Years of living in a family, and somehow I had collected more memories than actual space. Mom followed me to the garage, voice trembling with that mix of fear and manipulation that I knew too well. You don't have to make this a scene, she whispered. You're punishing us. Over a couch. I stopped, hands resting on the box. I'm not punishing you. I'm choosing myself. She shook her head like I'd said something offensive. You sound ungrateful. We fed you. Housed you. Helped you. There it was again. The invisible invoice. A lifetime of love itemized like utilities. I swallowed. And I'm thankful, I said. But grateful doesn't mean owed. Grateful doesn't mean I have to disappear. Dad appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. You're blowing up your relationship with your family over something small. You'll regret this. Maybe once that sentence would have trapped me. Maybe once the fear of being alone would have glued me back to the couch. But something had shifted. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of staying. I already regret staying as long as I did, I answered quietly. Adam finally looked up from his phone. So what's the plan? he asked. Where are you even going? He said it with that tone people use when they're sure you have nowhere else to land. I shrugged. I'll figure it out. Those words tasted different than when my parents used them against me. When they said figure it out, it meant you're on your own because we're done trying. When I said it, it meant I trusted myself to build something new. Not perfect, but mine. I loaded the boxes into the back seat of my car. My hands shook, not with fear but with adrenaline, like I had just stepped off a ledge and discovered the fall wasn't as deadly as I'd been told. Mom reached out, grabbing my wrist gently. At least stay tonight. Sleep on the couch. Think clearly in the morning. That sentence told me everything. There was never going to be a room. Never going to be a conversation. Only stalling until I accepted my place again. If I stay, I said softly, I won't leave. She didn't argue. 'Cause she knew I was right. Dad sighed loudly, like this wasn't breaking my heart but simply inconveniencing his evening. When you realize we were right, don't make a big production coming back, he said. Don't play the victim. I nodded slowly. I'm not the victim here, I said. I just finally stopped volunteering to play one. I closed the trunk. The sound echoed in my chest. Not like an ending. More like a door opening to somewhere unknown. I climbed into the driver's seat. The house windows glowed behind me like a stage set. Beautiful from the outside. Heavy on the inside. I sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing. No dramatic music. No big speech. Just a simple decision that changed everything. I turned the key. The engine hummed. My heart steadied. I pulled away slowly, half expecting someone to run after the car, apologize, say something different. No one did. They turned off the porch light. That part stung more than anything else. Felt like a sentence. Like a quiet agreement that since I wasn't following their script anymore, I no longer belonged in their scene. But as the streetlights stretched ahead of me, another feeling crept in. Relief. Gentle. Surprising. Real. I wasn't sure where I was going. I didn't have a lease waiting. I didn't have some dramatic plan. What I did have was the sudden realization that I didn't need permission to want peace. That night, I drove not toward a place, but toward a self I had been shelving for years. And for the first time in a long time, the road didn't feel lonely. Felt possible. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store without fully remembering how I got there. My brain had been driving while my heart sat in the passenger seat, replaying every conversation of the last few years like a cruel highlight reel. I stared at the automatic doors sliding open and closed, watching strangers go in and out, all with their own invisible storms. For a second, I wondered if I looked like one of them. Normal. Calm. Not like somebody who had just walked out of their childhood home carrying the weight of every unsaid sentence. I checked my phone. No calls. No texts. Not even a guilt message. The silence was louder than anything they could have said. I laughed under my breath, the sound shaky. All that talk about family first, and when I finally chose myself, they didn't even blink. I went inside, grabbed a cheap coffee from the machine, and sat at one of those tiny tables near the window. Chair wobbled. My hands still shook. But somewhere under the shaking there was something new. A thin line of calm. The kind of calm that comes when a decision stops arguing with you. I opened the Notes app and started typing numbers. Rent estimates. Gas. Groceries. Insurance. I had never really done the math because I was too busy feeling guilty for needing space. Now it looked almost doable. Not comfortable. Not easy. But possible. Behind me, a little kid begged their mother for candy and she said no, then laughed, ruffling their hair. It was such a small thing, but it hit me. Love didn't have to be grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Sometimes it was just showing up with boundaries and still being kind. I had never really had that at home. I'd had rules. expectations, conditions, but not the kind of love that said, "You matter even when you're inconvenient." The thought stung. Then it softened. Maybe the family I wanted wasn't behind me anymore. Maybe it was ahead of me. My phone buzzed. For a split second my heart jumped, thinking it was Mom, or Dad, or Adam. It was instead from Jenna, a coworker who only occasionally texted outside work. "Hey, are you okay? I heard something in your voice earlier. Let me know if you need anything." That one line almost undid me. Someone who didn't owe me anything noticed. Someone who wasn't related cared enough to check. I typed back slowly. "I moved out tonight. Long story. I'm safe. Just figuring things out." A typing bubble appeared. Then stopped. Then appeared again. "You can crash here if you need to. Couch isn't great, but it's yours tonight." I stared at the screen. My childhood home had a spare room, a guest room, a basement, and still somehow I was exiled to a couch. Yet someone I'd known less than 2 years was offering space without hesitation. Gratitude surged through me, mixing with grief. I wrote back, "Thank you. I'll be there." On the short drive over, memories flickered through my head like streetlights. Every time I'd been told to be grateful. Every time I'd been compared. Every time I'd been made smaller so someone else could feel bigger. But instead of swallowing them like I used to, I just watched them pass by. They were part of the story. They didn't have to be the ending. Jenna opened the door in pajamas, hair messy, eyes worried. "Hey," she said softly. No judgment. No lecture. Just presence. She handed me a blanket and pointed toward the couch. "Bathrooms down the hall. Fridge is fair game. We'll talk tomorrow. Tonight you sleep." Something loosened in my chest. Not because the couch was comfortable. It wasn't. Not because life suddenly made sense. It didn't. But because someone had drawn a line around me and called it care rather than debt. As I lay there in the dim light, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, my phone lit up once. A message from Dad. "Don't forget you still owe us respect no matter where you run." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I put the phone face down and whispered into the dark, "Respect is earned." The words didn't feel rebellious. They felt true. For the first time in my life, sleep found me instead of me chasing it. And it wasn't the sleep of exhaustion or defeat. It was the kind of sleep that comes when a door finally closes and you stop waiting for someone else to open it for you. Morning came quietly. No footsteps above my head. No cabinet slamming. No voices arguing about who used the last of the coffee. Just soft light creeping through the curtains and the steady hum of a normal apartment. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then it all rushed back. The couch. The boxes. The decision. Instead of panic, something else washed over me. Relief. Not the dramatic movie kind. The subtle kind. Kind that sounds like silence. I sat up slowly, wrapped in the blanket Jenna gave me, and looked around. There were mismatched picture frames. A dying plant valiantly trying to survive. Shoes kicked off near the door. Nothing about the place screamed perfect. But everything about it whispered, "This is safe." I made coffee quietly, trying not to disturb anything. When Jenna walked in, hair tied back, she smiled like this was normal. Like I wasn't a burden. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Better than I have in months," I admitted. She nodded. That's what happens when your nervous system finally gets to stop performing. Performing. The word landed. That's exactly what it had been. Home, everything was performance. Gratitude. Compliance. Silence. Even breathing felt rehearsed. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said gently. "But I'm here if you want to." I told her pieces. Not the whole novel. just the chapters that still echoed in my bones. The couch, the lectures, the weaponized gratitude. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't say, "They're still your parents," like most people do when they don't want to sit with someone else's discomfort. She just listened. When I finished, she took a sip of coffee and said, "That's not love. That's control wrapped in obligation." I felt something in my chest crack open, not in pain but in recognition. Later that day, I started calling apartments, studio listings, shared rentals, rooms in houses. Some places laughed at my budget. Some sounded like scams. Some were far. Some were possible. And every time someone said no, I didn't hear "you're failing" anymore. I heard "not this one. Keep going." Around noon, my phone buzzed again. "Mom." Finally. I stared for a moment before answering. "Hi." Her voice was carefully calm, the kind of calm people wear like perfume. "We're worried," she said. "You left angry." I almost smiled. I hadn't left angry. I'd left awake. "I left because I need space," I said. "A room. Privacy. Respect." She sighed as if I'd asked for a diamond necklace. "Rooms are limited. Life isn't fair. We gave you what we could." The old guilt tried to climb back into my throat. I swallowed it down. "You gave Adam what he needed," I said quietly. "You gave me what you could spare." Silence. Sharp and offended. "That's an ugly way to see it," she finally replied. I didn't argue. I just let the truth sit there. Then she said the line they always return to. "Family sacrifices. You don't just leave when things are uncomfortable." I closed my eyes. I didn't leave because it was uncomfortable. I left because it was shrinking me. Another silence. This one colder. "Well," she said flatly, "don't expect us to clean up your mess when things fall apart." "I'm not expecting anything," I said. "That's the point." We hung up without saying "I love you." Not out of hate. Out of honesty. I sat there a while, staring at my phone, realizing how quiet the world gets when you stop begging for crumbs. That afternoon, Jenna drove me to a viewing for a tiny studio above a bakery. The hallway smelled like bread and cinnamon. The walls were thin. The floor creaked. The windows stuck a little when you opened them. But there was a door. That locked. Corner for a bed. A small table. A life. The landlord, an older woman with kind eyes, explained everything with patience. First month. Deposit. Rules. Noise limits. I nodded. I calculated. I took a breath. "I can do it," I said. The words tasted like bravery and fear mixed together. She smiled. "Then welcome home." I signed. My hand shook again, not from dread but from relief disguised as adrenaline. That night, I stood in the center of the empty studio, listening to the muffled sounds of the bakery downstairs and the faint noise of traffic outside. I placed my boxes in the corner. I unfolded the blanket Jenna gave me. I sat on the bare floor and just breathed. No couch. No lectures. No gratitude debt quietly ticking in the background. Just me. Existing. Without apology. And for the first time in my life, the space I was in didn't feel borrowed. Felt earned. And chosen. The first night in the studio felt strange in a quiet way. Not scary. Not lonely. Just different. Like my body didn't quite believe it was allowed to relax yet. I lay on the mattress on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to the bakery downstairs wash dishes and close up for the night. Every once in a while, the pipes groaned and I laughed softly because somehow even that sounded kinder than the chaos I left behind. I kept waiting for the door to slam open. For someone to walk in. For someone to tell me I was taking up too much space. Nothing happened. Just air. Just quiet. Just me. The next morning, sunlight poured through the thin curtains and warmed my face. No one ordered me to get up earlier. No one told me I was lazy. I made coffee on my tiny stove and sat on the floor with my knees tucked up to my chest, feeling like a kid and an adult at the same time. I opened my phone and saw the family group chat had exploded overnight. Messages stacked one after another. Where are you? You overreacted. We're worried. Come home and talk like an adult. Then Adam chimed in. His words felt familiar. Annoyed. Superior. Practiced. You left us with all the responsibility. You made Mom cry. You're acting selfish. I stared at the messages for a long time. Old me would have started typing apologies, explaining, justifying, trying to earn basic understanding like it was a reward. New me did something else. I locked the phone and set it face down. I wasn't running back into a burning house just because someone inside yelled my name. Later that day, Jenna came by with a bag of groceries and dish soap and a small plant that looked like it might actually survive. Housewarming, she said, grinning. I laughed. It's barely a house. It's yours, she answered. That counts. We unpacked together. We put cups in cabinets and folded towels and arranged plates that didn't match. With every item placed, the apartment shifted from empty space to living space. I felt my shoulders drop lower and lower, like gravity was finally letting go of me. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. His messages were shorter. Colder. We need the couch. Bring the blanket back. Also return your key until you decide what you're doing. I reread it twice because of how transactional it sounded. Not a question. Not concern. A directive. A reminder. You don't belong here. You never did. I typed slowly. I'm keeping the blanket. I bought it. I'm keeping my key. I paid rent. There was a long pause. Then 3 dots. Then nothing. I realized something important right then. They didn't want me back. They wanted my compliance back. They wanted the version of me that didn't question, didn't need, didn't speak. And she was gone. That afternoon I walked around the neighborhood getting to know the streets. Small stores. A park with an old fountain. Kids on scooters. People living regular lives instead of walking on eggshells every second. I sat on a bench and breathed deeper than I had in years. For a moment, guilt tried to sneak in. That familiar whisper. They raised you. You owe them. But another voice, quieter, steadier, finally spoke up. They raised a child. Not an indentured servant. Not a permanent couch guest. Not a gratitude machine. On the way home, I stopped at a thrift store and bought a tiny lamp and a cheap rug. Nothing special. But when I put the lamp on the crate I was using as a nightstand and rolled the rug across the floor, the place glowed differently. Softer. Warmer. Like it was slowly learning my name. That evening, the phone rang. Not a text. Call. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi. Her voice was clipped. Your father says you're keeping the key. Yes. And the blanket. Yes. A long, brittle silence. You are making this harder than it needs to be, she said. My chest tightened, but not the way it used to. Instead of collapsing inward, it braced. No, I said gently. I'm just not shrinking anymore. She laughed, but it wasn't amused. It was sharp. You think you're strong now because you have a mattress on the floor and a hot plate? There it was. The belittling dressed up as concern. I took a breath. I think I'm strong because I finally chose myself, I said. Another silence. This one full of something wounded and defensive tangled together. Don't forget who fed you, she snapped. Who gave you a roof? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I won't forget. But I also won't pretend the price tag on that roof is obedience for the rest of my life. She exhaled hard. When this falls apart, don't come crawling back. And then she hung up. No goodbye. No love you. Just threat disguised as prediction. I stared at the phone again. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but because letting go sometimes feels like free fall even when it's the right thing. I climbed onto my mattress, pulled the plant closer to the window, and whispered, "We're going to be okay." Not because I knew the future. Not because everything was magically fixed. But because for the first time I was building something that wasn't dependent on approval I could never fully earn. That night, as the bakery below cooled and the city outside hummed softly, I realized another truth. Leaving wasn't betrayal. Leaving was self-rescue. And nobody who truly loved me would want to pull me back into the burning building just so they wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. The second week in the studio felt different in my bones. Not comfortable yet, but steadier. Like walking on a bridge that still creaked but didn't sway as violently. I woke up every morning to light sliding across the wall like slow water. I would lie there for a few seconds and remember. I'm not on the couch. I'm not in anyone's way. Nobody is about to step over me and lecture me about gratitude. I made routines out of small acts. Coffee first. Stretch my back. Open the window even if the air was cold. Those little choices felt like stitches. Sewing myself together quietly. Then the messages started again. Less explosive. More manipulative. You know your brother is stressed. You abandoned us at a hard time. Families work through things. I read them like someone reading weather alerts from a city they no longer lived in. Important to them. Dangerous for them. But not my sky anymore. One evening, Jenna came over after her shift and plopped on the floor with a bag of noodles and 2 plastic forks. "Your place feels bigger every time I come," she said. I laughed. "It's the same size." "Yeah," she said, "but you aren't shrinking anymore." Gives the room. Her words landed hard. In a good way. We ate. We talked. We made fun of my crooked thrift store lamp. And then the conversation drifted back to my family like it always eventually did. "They keep saying I hurt them," I said. "That I left them when they needed me." Jenna nodded slowly. "You did leave," she said gently. "But not because you didn't care. Because staying was killing you." I pressed my lips together. "Why does it still feel wrong then?" She shrugged. "Because your whole life you were trained to measure right and wrong by how comfortable they were. Not by how safe you were." Something inside my chest cracked open quietly. Not pain. Clarity. After she left, I cleaned up my dishes, wiped the counter, and stood in the middle of the room, letting her words echo. I had always tried to keep the peace. But peace that required disappearing wasn't peace. It was silence. A few days later, Dad texted me. Not angry this time. Not cold. Worse. Friendly. "Hey kiddo. Wanna come over for dinner Sunday? We'll talk things out. We miss you." My fingers hovered. Old scripts jumped up like ghosts. Be the good one. Fix it. Keep everyone happy. But then I remembered the couch. The lectures. The invisible line between family and guest they kept moving whenever it benefited them. I typed back. "I'm not ready. We can talk on the phone if you want." He took half an hour to respond. When the message finally came, all the friendliness had evaporated. "Fine. But don't drag this out. Adults face problems. They don't run." I exhaled slowly. That word again. Run. They kept calling it running because they refused to see it as choosing. Choosing boundaries. Choosing space. Choosing air. That night, I went for a walk around the block. The sky was bruised purple. The bakery smelled like sugar. Cars hummed softly. Normal life moving forward whether or not my parents approved. I stood outside the park fence and watched a little girl climb the jungle gym while her dad spotted her patiently. "You've got it," he said. Calm. Proud. Safe. Something in me tightened. Then loosened. I didn't envy the child. I envied the safety. On the way back, I passed a used furniture shop that had a sign taped to the window. Clearance. Cash only. My heart jumped. I went inside and found a small second-hand couch. Nothing fancy. Faded gray. A tiny threadbare spot on the arm. But when I sat on it, it didn't sag. It held me. I bought it and arranged delivery for the next day. When they brought it up the stairs, I almost cried. I pushed it against the wall, laid the cheap rug in front of it, placed my little lamp beside it. The room shifted again, from survival space to living space. I sat down and whispered, "This one is mine." That evening, the phone rang again. "Dad." I answered. "You're making a spectacle," he said without hello. "Everyone is asking where you are. What are we supposed to tell people?" I stared at the opposite wall. "Tell them the truth," I said. "Your adult daughter moved into her own apartment." He scoffed. "You make everything dramatic." I let the words pass by me like wind. "I'm not coming Sunday," I said. "And if you want to talk, we'll talk respectfully. Not from a place where I'm the problem by default." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother is hurt." "I know," I said softly. "But I'm hurt too." "You're overreacting." "Maybe," I said. "But even if you believe that, it doesn't mean my feelings vanish." He exhaled sharply. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said again. Then I added, "But regret from my own couch feels different than regret from the couch you let me borrow." He hung up. The silence afterward didn't swallow me like it used to. Instead, it wrapped around me like night air. I curled up on my couch and stared at the plant by the window, noticing how the leaves slowly turned toward the light on their own. No one had to force them. They simply knew where growth lived. For the first time, I felt something calm and fierce at the same time. I wasn't fighting them. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't proving anything. I was simply choosing to live like I mattered. And if that made me the villain in their story, then maybe it was time I stopped auditioning for their approval and started writing my own script. A couple of weeks later, life started to find its rhythm. Not perfect. Not magically fixed. But steady in a way I didn't know stability could feel. Bills came. I paid them. Groceries ran low. I planned better. Work got stressful. I rested instead of begging for permission to breathe. And slowly, something shifted inside me. Constant buzzing anxiety quieted. Not gone. Just quieter. Like a radio turned down from full blast to background noise. Then one afternoon, I got the message that changed everything. Family dinner. Sunday. Mandatory. No excuses. It wasn't even phrased like an invitation. It was a command. The old panic tried to crawl up my spine. Mandatory meant lecture. Meant ambush. Meant everyone around the table pretending this was love while I shrank under the weight of it. I was about to type, "I can't make it," when another thought landed. I'm not the same person anymore. I didn't need to avoid them. I needed to show up differently. So I wrote back, "I'll come, but I'm not staying if it becomes a lecture." Dad replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That alone told me they weren't listening. Sunday came. I stood outside the house I had grown up in, and for the first time it didn't feel like home. Felt like a museum filled with old versions of me. I took a breath and walked in. Mom was in the kitchen acting normal. Too normal. Overly cheerful. "You're here." she said, coming over for a hug that felt like a negotiation more than affection. I hugged back politely, not apologetically. Table was set. Adam already sat there, scrolling his phone like nothing monumental had fractured our family in the last few weeks. We ate. Small talk. Work. Weather. Nothing real. And then it came. Dad cleared his throat. So, he said, folding his hands, let's talk about you coming home. The words were so casual it almost sounded like an afterthought. I set my fork down. I'm not coming home, I said gently. I have a home. Mom's smile tightened. Sweetheart, your little place is temporary. Family is permanent. I met her eyes. Family doesn't have to mean living where I'm not respected. Adam scoffed quietly. Here we go. I ignored him. Dad leaned forward. You've made your point. You needed space. You got it. Now it's time to be realistic. We can't keep explaining to people why our daughter is acting out. There it was. Not concern. Image. Reputation. I felt my hand shake, but my voice stayed steady. I didn't move out to embarrass you, I said. I moved out because living here was hurting me. Mom's eyes flashed. You had a roof. Food. Safety. I had conditions, I said softly. And a couch. Silence fell heavy. Adam rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic again. I turned toward him. Not angry. Clear. You got the master bedroom. A desk. Privacy. I got the couch because there wasn't space. But there was always space for you. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Dad shook his head. Life isn't equal. We do what we can. I nodded. Exactly. And now I'm doing what I can. For me. Mom's voice sharpened. After everything we've done for you, you talk like this? There was the guilt. Always waiting. Always ready. I inhaled slowly. What you did for me is called parenting, I said. I'm grateful. Truly. But it doesn't mean I owe you my adulthood. The room went still. I could feel the tension thicken like humidity before a storm. For a second, I thought they would explode. Instead, Dad leaned back and said something I'd heard my entire life. Respect your parents. I nodded. I do. But respect goes both ways. Not in this house, he snapped. I felt something in me settle. That sentence answered more questions than years of therapy could have. Not in this house. That was the truth. Respect had rules here. It went downward. Never back up. And that was why I had always felt small, even when I was fully grown. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and carefully placed it back down. Then it's good I don't live in this house anymore. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not manipulative. Just hurt. You're leaving us, she whispered. That part broke my heart. Because it wasn't true. And also because it was true in a way she refused to see. I'm not leaving, I said quietly. I'm changing the way I exist here. Dad scoffed. Therapy talk. I smiled sadly. Maybe. But it's also survival. Conversation unraveled from there. They tried every tactic. Guilt. Nostalgia. Threats. Promises. At one point, Mom said, Fine, we'll give you the guest room if that's what this is about. I shook my head. It's not about rooms. It's about roles. And I'm done playing the one who disappears so everyone else feels comfortable. Adam muttered under his breath. Selfish. I turned toward him again. Want to know something? I said. For years, I thought selfish meant choosing myself at all. Now I realize it means asking someone else to disappear for your comfort. And I'm not doing that anymore. Silence again. This one different. He didn't meet my eyes. We finished the meal mostly in quiet. When it was over, I stood, thanked Mom for dinner, and grabbed my jacket. No shouting. No slamming doors. Just choosing. At the door, Dad said, "Last chance to do the right thing." I paused and looked back. I am. And then I left. The drive back to my studio was calm. Not triumphant. Not dramatic. Just honest. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside, the smell of bread from downstairs drifted up and filled the room. I sank onto my thrift store couch and stared at the plant by the window, its leaves tilted toward the light like it always knew how to find what fed it. That's when the tears finally came. Not the desperate, choking sobs I used to have. These were softer. Grieving. Releasing. Grateful. I wasn't celebrating that things were hard. I was grateful I finally believed my pain wasn't imaginary. Later that week, something happened I didn't expect. Mom texted. Not long paragraphs. Not guilt. Just 3 words. "I'm thinking." Then another. "I'm listening." I sat on my couch and let myself cry again. Not because everything was fixed, but because maybe slowly we were all learning something new. And if not, I was still okay. 'Cause revenge wasn't slamming doors or cutting them off forever. My revenge was quieter. It was choosing a life where my worth wasn't measured in obedience, sacrifice, or how quietly I could sleep on a couch. My revenge was a key on my own keychain. Couch that didn't belong to someone else. A door I could lock. A voice I didn't have to swallow. They wanted me small. I chose space. They wanted gratitude without accountability. I chose boundaries. They wanted silence. I chose truth. And in the quiet of that tiny studio, with the city humming outside and the smell of bread drifting in, I finally understood something I wish I had learned years ago. Loving your family doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes the bravest, loudest, most healing thing you can do is stand up, step away, and say, "I deserve better." And then actually build it. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Day by day.